Our next guest for cloud sustainability is the new FinOps is Aerin Booth. Aerin, thank you so much for joining.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. Yours is working, mine's working. We're in a good start for this.
We can get started, definitely. That's good.
Aerin, I
Good when it
feel
works.
like this is like deja vu that we just talked a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
We've been speaking quite regularly, actually. Yeah, so we did our live stream over reInvent on the Thursday morning, looking at sort of what I expected from Werner's keynote, and I don't think he delivered. I don't know about you, but I don't
Well,
remember
we're
hearing
going to get
anything.
to that in a second, but let's talk about, our topic and give you a little bit of a chance to introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into things. This is your time to shine.
Brilliant. Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Aerin Booth. I am a tech founder and cloud sustainability advocate, which is just a made-up title because I want to care and do more about climate change. So, cloud therapists and all the other titles that have come before. Here's the next one on the block. So I used to be the head of cloud computing for the UK Home Office. So I looked after all of the UK Home Office's strategy, and I was responsible for all of our spend on the cloud. So I negotiated a contract with Amazon that was £130 million over 3 years. I was part of a negotiation for the Memorandum of Understanding between the UK government and AWS, which was a very large EDP contract. Probably the first time that Amazon's ever engaged with any sort of unionization positively, but I'm glad it happened because the UK government got loads of savings from that. So over the time that I worked at the Home Office, I was able to save them about £10 million. But I left last year after suffering from some burnout and anxiety. So, there was only so much that I could think to myself, okay, all I do is work in IT, and what I actually work on isn't really, the actual immigration stuff or the visas or the rejections or any of the crazy policies that might come out of a government department. But I sort of was going through this burnout and realized that I kind of needed to leave and do something else. So I recently set up a consultancy focused on reducing carbon emissions in tech and IT. So that's called Cloud Sustainably. Been doing that for about 18 months, and met John at reInvent this year. I was speaking at reInvent, and I'll be covering some of the talk that I did, which is on being ethical in tech and focused on cloud sustainability. So that's a bit of an intro.
So I'm noticing a little bit of a theme. You were dealing with cost and negotiating the contracts, but also the spend within the environment. And now you've taken more of a stance on the sustainability. Obviously, spend less, but also be aware of what you're doing within the carbon's emissions within the environment and driving towards that. So thank you so much, Aerin, for taking that stance. Let's jump into a couple of things and specifically some questions. Now, remind the audience, don't forget to drop some gifts, some comments, some chats, some emojis, whatever you want to do. Hit that like, subscribe. No, sorry, wrong channel. Let's talk about our topic a little bit. And really, how does this fit in with FinOps? I mean, we're talking about sustainability, and you mentioned, is it the new FinOps? How does that come together?
So for me, I'm trying to be a bit provocative, get people thinking about this a little bit more well-rounded. When we think of FinOps, what we think about a lot of the time is just cost savings. And you're right that, like, in terms of cost savings, it is related to sustainability, but not everything is. You may sign an EDP contract or do an RI or a savings plan, and that isn't actually going to reduce your usage or make you more efficient. Actually, you might have a perverse incentive to spend up to that amount each year because of the pre-existing deal. So, when you're looking at, okay, well, I've signed up for this EDP for several years, and my growth didn't hit what I thought it would be at this point, would you really start doing any efficiency drives at that point in time, or would you want to continue saving money on that contract and basically not lose face with this negotiation that you've done a few years beforehand? So for me, I think, for a lot of us on this call, we're kind of well into FinOps. I mean, you can't grab me away. I love spreadsheets. I love SCPs. I love cloud governance and management. But what I've found, and I think a lot of people probably recognize this as well, is what really drives savings and efficiency is getting teams to care about this problem. If I said to you, hey, development team, you need to start caring about this to save me a bit more money, to make our company a bit more profit, is that really something that's going to drive you? But if I can say, hey, you need to be more efficient to reduce carbon emissions, here's the difference you can make when it comes to climate change and saving the world, that's going to be a little bit more motivational. I guess I've got a few questions, for the chat. So let me put my first one in. Actually, I think it's a Q&A one.
Yes, Richard, he did say I love spreadsheets. And in fact, we talked with Tia Dubuisson. I don't know if I pronounced that, so sorry, Tia, earlier, where her topic was no more spreadsheets. I forgot to call it out specifically. And yes, he likes his spreadsheet. There's nothing wrong with those. Who doesn't like a good Excel? But did you drop your question?
It's the first Q&A question if we can get it out to everyone. So do you currently worry or care about climate change at the moment for the audience? Because I have a bit of a sneaking suspicion that majority of you do think about this. It's something that really drove me to start doing something differently. Last year when I was like, what do I want to do with my life? Then I thought climate change and reducing carbon emissions was the most important thing. But yeah, spreadsheets, you're never going to get away from them in some ways. I mean, I looked after £35 million worth of spend. We still ran a lot of it through spreadsheets. There are tooling out there, but tooling isn't how you solve these problems. It's basically understanding the problem, having visibility, and getting people to make those changes. So that's what I'm saying with sustainability. Now we start having these conversations with development teams and say, hey, you can reduce carbon emissions. That's going to be a lot more motivational. So let's see, where's the Q&A poll coming up to? I don't know how to view it.
Oh,
But
I got right. Oh no, it says create one. You know what? We're gonna let Jess and them do kind of the polls. We'll have
yeah,
that
yeah.
run. If you want to drop that into the chat, she'll try to get that poll out there. But here's a question for you: is that how do you decide between financially sustaining your company, and excuse the pun for sustaining, but and doing the right thing and being aware of the environment? There's got to be
Mm.
a balance where you have to choose one or try to choose both, but it does come with a cost.
I mean, you could say the same about FinOps. If you said to me, save me as much money as you can on the cloud, I could come in and turn everything off. That doesn't mean your business is going to actually deliver their outcomes or you're going to make any money, but I will have done my objective and saved you all of that money. I think what we're seeing now when it comes to kind of requirements on businesses depends on the size of business that you work at. There's a load of different directions why we need to start caring about sustainability. We have reporting requirements that are legislated or legal. So in European Union, all multinationals or companies over a certain size of 500 individuals will now have to report all of their scope 3 carbon emissions when it comes to what they deliver, and that will be out in 2024. So businesses have a ticking time bomb now to be able to basically articulate what is the carbon emissions for my IT and my whole business. So it's been driven by those legal changes. We have other directions as well, and this is what I'm trying to say to everyone here. We need to start basically shouting ourselves who work for these companies. We're all individuals and we all contribute to tech, but we have a bit of an oversized impact on the world. When it comes to carbon emissions, and I won't go into too much detail now because I've got a few more polls and questions. Hopefully they'll come out to see what people think. But when it comes to carbon emissions, IT contributes a lot. And, as an individual, there are only 28 million developers around the world. That's 28 million developers who are all building every technical product we interact with. The stream that we're using now, the laptops
Wait,
I'm
wait, wait. You
using,
said only 28 million.
out
Hmm.
of a population of 8 billion,
Yeah, I
it's a big
know.
difference, isn't it?
That's
We
still
have a
a
lot of
lot of developers,
responsibility.
right?
Over the world as well. So that's not just any one country. I think for me, that's when I started to realize when I was coming out of the home office, and it's like, how can I make the biggest impact on climate change? I'm good at cloud computing. I love spreadsheets. It pays really well, and it can really help fight climate change. I can get this carbon reduced by working with businesses, by coming to do talks like this and showing people some facts and figures. But yeah, it's all related, and it's coming up fast. I think people are going to start caring about this a lot more very soon.
So, Aaron, your poll has come back 75% worry about climate change.
75%. I mean, I don't know if anyone else might have found that surprising before we saw the results. It's one of those things where I think when I speak to a lot of people, I always try and pull out these questions and have some direct conversations. But I think a lot of people worry about this, but don't think anyone else is. We're 75% of the people listening to this call today. That's about 300 people. 75% of them, we all work in tech. We all care about this. So here's the opportunity we have to try and make a difference and do something about it. So 75% of you said you worry about it. Let me ask another question, and I'll post this one
Well,
in the
real
chat.
quick. So, Aaron, let me ask you the question. And 75%, are you telling me that I actually, there's a comment in the thing that it sounds a little bit of a low number. Why aren't more people worried about why isn't everybody worried about being sustainable, the climate change, anything around it, anything that you do should have
Mm.
some type of concern with it means you're worried about it or have a thought process.
I think in some ways our life is getting touched on like by this problem almost in every way these days. We see the weather around us, it impacts the food and the access we have with like everything else that we have access to. Like, we're seeing prices go up for loads of different things. And when I jump into my presentation, I'll go through my journey and why I kind of came to this realization. But I think 75% is about what polling says. When you look at US polling, 70% of people do worry about climate change. I couldn't tell you why those 25% of people said you don't worry about it right now. But I mean, for me, even if you care about climate change or not, this sort of work to make our cloud and the IT more efficient, it's just good. It saves you money. It makes you more secure. The less data that you hold about your customers, the less the blast radius is going to be if something ever does go wrong. And like I said, be more efficient, and that'll help you optimize your workload. So coming back to that thing, this is culture change. This is about saying to other people, hey, let's stop caring about this. Let's be more efficient when we use the cloud. And yeah, I think that's going to be a bit more effective than the traditional FinOps approach to date, which has been buy this tooling to solve all your problems, and people will start doing something about it, which I don't think we always see when we start rolling out these messages to teams.
Aerin, to be more efficient in utilization of the cloud. Well, speaking of the cloud, reInvent 2022 just ended. Now, my question to you is that in 2021, the sustainability pillar was released. Last year, April, the carbon
Mm.
footprint was released. What are your feelings from last year to this year?
So last year we had some of those big things like the sustainability pillar. I was really happy when that came out. I was kind of infused at reInvent, and just before when it was published, I was using it myself in the home office just before I left. And it was great to see. It was definitely a work in progress. There were some elements that weren't that interesting or useful. So how they helped you do region selection wasn't really that clever, and it really just kind of blew a hole in some of their own arguments. Some of the graphs and images they shared that you should make a decision where Amazon has renewable energy projects, and it'd show Amazon in America would have 400 projects, but then it would also say the majority of those things were solar panels on top of Whole Food stores, which I don't know how that's going to help me make a better decision when it comes to cloud computing. So yeah, the sustainability pillar is great. I'm glad it exists. It's also the first example of a new shared responsibility model. If you've not seen that before, you should definitely go look at it. And basically says what you should care about. And this is the sort of thing we need to look at the way we configure our architecture, the coding languages that we use, the amount of data that we hold, how long we hold it for. These are all the responsibilities that Amazon says you need to start thinking about this. So it's useful from that point of view. I would say that the difficulty I have is that it makes you think about sustainability as a separate aside from the rest of your decision making. So you might look at that model and go, okay, I need to care about security, I need to care about resiliency, I need to care about these other things first before sustainability, because it's the last addition to the pillar, it's probably at the bottom of the list. And that's the sort of thing where we end up making decisions for resiliency or security, which probably isn't that compatible with being a sustainable business, not just for your own money, because we're spending so much money for data storage and logging that we never look at, but also for the environment. How much longer can you say for your customers and to your own employees that this is the way the world works, and this is what we're going to do. We're just going to do what the cloud has told us to do. We're going to capture all these logs. We're going to build a data lake, and we're just going to mess around with some ML and AI when actually you don't need all of that to deliver your business. So I think, I would say it's a great start, but in some ways it makes you think about it separately. They've got more to do in that area. The cloud carbon footprint tool, and maybe this is a good time for me to jump into my presentation that I delivered at reInvent, and we can go through a few of the slides. So I'll quickly bring that up.
We've got about 10 minutes left. And while you're bringing that up, do you think that you mentioned all the utilizing all these different services, the data lake, the ML? Do you think it has anything to do with the education around utilizing these services, and that folks are trying to get the best out of them and they're not understanding the pieces that come together, which ultimately relates to the skills gap and understanding not only the skills on doing the services, but around sustainability?
I think there's a few issues that are going on at the moment when it comes to how we think about the cloud. Is the cloud has been sold to us over the last decade and a half for being unlimited, infinitely scalable. You don't need to worry about all these hard problems because we're going to solve them like ourselves. We're going to do the hard things for you. But it just gives us more things to think about. And again, it comes back to that culture thing of, okay, if we think about our IT as unlimited, we're never going to put in the effort or think innovatively to be efficient because we don't have to. Where are boundaries that say you have to meet this network bandwidth or only work within these boundaries of data storage or even the CPU? You can get so many big servers and even scale out with serverless as much as you want. But that doesn't mean you're being efficient. That just means that the thing's able to run. So, we've got a bit of a problem. 15 years people have been using the cloud. People who've only just started using technology within the last decade would have only ever known about the cloud. So again, I think to the people in this room, I don't know all of your backgrounds or how long you've been working in tech, but, for me, I touched on servers when I was working for a large enterprise company. If you've not done that because you're at a startup, all your interaction with the data centers is I click a button and something gets deployed. You don't see where that data center is. You don't understand the scale and the size and the environmental impact that these data centers have. So it is a lot of it a bit of a cultural issue. I was trying to do a bit of a thing to link all my Q&A questions with what I'm saying, but I can't even remember what
Yep.
they are now. And we've only got 10 minutes left. So
Well, let's
Jessica, if you
actually, so I was a little misspoken
get them
for
in.
the time that's left. You actually,
Yeah.
because we're going to bring Giddy back on at 2:40. We only have like less than 5. Let's go to your
Well, let's get the
presentation, which
questions in the Q&A. Get the Q&A out there. So let me just quickly jump to a few things. So,
yeah, let's get
um,
out the important stuff that you want the folks to leave here with. Don't forget to drop some questions and comments in the chat. We'll get those to Aerin later on.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So the internet and the cloud computing is responsible for about 4% of the world's carbon emissions. That's 1 in every 25 tons of CO2 that's released into the atmosphere comes from our use of technology. That's expected to double by 2030. All of the computers, data centers, internet traffic, and everything else that touches the internet and the cloud is expected to basically emit at least 8 to 10% of our carbon emissions within the next decade. For me, that's something where I kind of go, is this right? Is this how we should be looking at how we use technology? Just because it exists doesn't mean we just need to keep on using more of it and giving Amazon and other cloud providers all of our money. There's more to the cloud than just burning carbon to make money as well. So your business and how you use technology, it's really important to think about more than just that money and even carbon. So this is a tool that has been created by some members of the Climate Action Tech Working Group with a great big community on Slack. There'll probably be some links in the chat after this, and I can share that with everyone. But this gives you a visualization to think about more when it comes to your IT and how it impacts the world. So if you think around the outside, there are 9 planetary boundaries that we need to make sure we don't go through, and data centers contribute to a lot of these things. And inside, this is more about what we do with our businesses and our software, but these are the 12 needs that society needs to provide to have a fair and equitable society. So, housing, energy, water, food. So if any of your digital services go towards helping people get access to these things, that's a great win. But this is the thing where I talk about a lot is like, let's start thinking about the purpose of what we're building. Do we really need all this information to do the thing that we're trying to do here? And how can we kind of be more efficient in the cloud? Just to give you a bit of an idea of how those data centers interact with those things, then in London, house building has to be reduced by 10% over the next decade until at least 2030 because there's so many data centers near the west of London off the M4 that we cannot approve any new houses to be built due to the strain on the energy grid. Housing, like many people who live in urban areas in America, like people who live in London might be listening to this, is probably big on people's lists of what governments and people to care about. Is it right that data centers can basically reduce that housing stock because we prioritize TikTok videos and funny images on the internet over the lives of the people who live near these data centers? Not only that, but data centers in Ireland could use up to 70% of their overall electricity by 2030. That is, if every single planning permission that was currently in progress was approved and all of those data centers were built out to their maximum capacity, that would be the impact. And something I haven't got on here, and I'll turn off the slideshow, and there's a link to a recorded version of this at the end of the talk.
Actually, that was the request. Where the link for it, so that we can share.
Yeah, I will put a link in the chat, but I'll just stop sharing for now because one of the things that happened over the last few days, and I just wanted to touch on this very briefly before the end of it, is that we're talking about AWS here, but there's no real cloud provider that's kind of solved these problems. I think Azure and GCP are a little bit better when it comes to recording, reporting, and being able to see the carbon emissions. But one of the things, for example, that Microsoft have just done is in order to get planning permission for a new data center in Ireland, they've agreed to build a new gas-powered power plant of 170 megawatts to basically power and act as a handover for that data center. And I just think it's crazy when the world is worrying about climate change. 1.5 degrees is what we need to meet. We've got cloud providers building gas-powered power plants just so they can build more data centers. And that's the sort of thing where the stuff we do on the cloud and the reason we need to be more efficient is because this is the real world that we live in. Like, just because we can't see the scale of these problems on our laptop or in the cupboards that we used to touch in the past, doesn't mean this doesn't exist elsewhere in the world. So, these big data centers, we need to start caring about a bit more. So, yeah, I think with running out of time, you should definitely check out my podcast. That link's just gone in the chat. That's called Public Cloud for Public Good, talking about cloud sustainability and how we can make the world a better place through the use of cloud services. And I've got a link tree there, and inside that link tree link is a link to a recorded version of my reInvent talk. So make sure you check that out on YouTube. And yeah, feel free to ask questions, and yeah, stay in touch.